Is the Ableton Push 2 still worth it in 2022? It was released in 2015 to replace the original Push that was manufactured by Akai. And people have been saying that the Push 3 is coming out any moment now, and they've been saying this for years. And yet here we are, it's 2022, and still there is no third iteration of the Push. I bought mine 5 years ago, and I'm gonna give you my thoughts and impressions as a long-term user. I'm also going to discuss what its primary use in terms of composition versus live performance, its main selling point, the build quality and feel, a very brief overview of its functionality and features, a summary of its pros and cons, and there are 2 problems that I don't see people talk about too much that I want to mention in this video. And finally, I'm gonna give you my recommendation whether it's worth buying or maybe whether you should wait for Push 3 if that's coming out at all. And there will be timestamps so you can check out the sections that you're interested in, and let's get right into it. So what's the primary use of the Push 2? It's an instrument for music creation, beat making, sampling, sequencing, and so on. And Ableton's own marketing leans heavily on that side and not so much on live performance. I mean, of course you can perform live with it, but it's not a live performance controller in the way that the Akai APC40 is, where you can simultaneously control a number of tracks, devices, and different parameters from different tracks without switching to a different page or menu. With the Push 2, you're mostly controlling the track you have selected at any given moment. Well, except for launching clips and mixer controls. So for live performance, you may need to combine it with another controller for controlling devices on more than one track without constantly switching or having access to device controls and mixer controls simultaneously. And that of course would depend on your exact way of performing live. And so if you're gonna play it live like an instrument, yeah, sure, it's great for that. In my opinion, it's not the most complete solution for those hybrid live/DJ sets. It also doesn't allow you to do your own MIDI mappings unless you switch to the user mode, but then you're out of the actual proper Ableton Live integration mode, so it doesn't really solve that problem. The main selling point of the Push 2, at least for me, is the fact that you have this drum machine, groovebox type of workflow integrated tightly inside Ableton Live. And when you finish making the beat, you don't need to track or export to a DAW. You're already inside one of the industry-leading DAWs. You just press the arrangement record button as you launch the clips, and it's easy to create a sketch of an arrangement. This makes the whole process quicker and easier and provides more flexibility than using something like Machine or MPC and exporting and importing audio stems or separate tracks. And the integration is just superb. It almost feels like a hardware groovebox, and it's arguably easier to use than most of them. And onto the build quality and feel of the Ableton Push 2. To say that it has good build quality would be an understatement. It is extremely solid. In fact, it's so solid and heavy that you can use it for self-defense, and I'm not even exaggerating. The feel of the pads is excellent, as well as their sensitivity, and of course you can customize the velocity curve and the sensitivity as well. The knobs are smooth and extremely precise, allowing you to fine-tune parameters very easily. The buttons feel solid too, and they are not noisy, but, and here's one of my main gripes that I have with the Push 2. I don't like that the buttons require quite a bit of force to press, presumably to prevent accidental presses, but this slows the user down compared to Machine and the MPC platforms. It may sound like a small thing, but when you're in the zone, it's hard to have an extremely fast workflow and fly around as quickly as I'm used to doing it on the Machine. So if you're coming from Machine or MPC, bear in mind that these hard-to-press buttons may slow you down, but of course your mileage may vary. And the Push 2 comes with Ableton Live Intro, and you can buy it bundled with a more full-featured version, and of course this will cost more than the basic version that comes with Ableton Live Intro. Okay, so here are some of the things that you can do with the Push 2. You can browse and add devices and tracks. You have access to the full browser that you have in Ableton Live. You can edit devices, and with stuff like wavetable and hybrid reverb and some of the other devices, you've got a nice visual representation of the parameters and not just text. You got the mixed view where you have access to volumes, pass, sends, and you can even actually set the inputs and outputs of the tracks for setting up recording. Sequencing is also very flexible. You got a couple of layouts for viewing the drum rack. You can also have this step sequencer on top, in addition to real-time recording, which is of course complemented with full quantization features and swing, ability to delete notes and all the necessary features for a beat making workflow. Sampling is of course a very central feature of the Push 2. You got full control over the simpler device and chopping samples right on the Push without the need to use the mouse or keyboard. So this is the drum layout and this is your melodic instrument layout. Currently we are using the in-key mode. When you go to scale, you can set up your scales so that only the correct notes for a certain key or scale are present on the pads. And this is the in-key mode. You can also switch to chromatic, where you have all the notes available. You also have the note repeat here on the right. And again, we're still in notes mode. Here's your session mode, where you can trigger clips from the session view, of course. Oh, by the way, if you're enjoying the video and if it's useful, give it a thumbs up and comment down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. And if you are already a Push user, you can check out my Ableton Live packs that work great with the Ableton Push 2. Again, this will be found in the description of the video. And there are a couple of Push tutorials that I will link in the description. Check out these as well. Back to the video now. Things you can't do with the Push 2. There are a few things that you can't do. Saving, naming projects, exporting audio. There is no such functionality on the Push. And there's no integration and automatic control of parameters of third-party plugins as you have with the native Ableton devices. So that's a bit of a drawback, but on the other hand, it pairs well with, for example, a complete control keyboard from native instruments, which is pretty good for controlling plugins. And there's not much in terms of navigating the arrangement page, moving clips and so on. So indeed, the session view is where the Push 2 really shines. Personally, I don't really understand when people say they want more arrangement view functionality from it. To me, this is something that is much quicker and easier to do with the mouse and keyboard. But if you really insist on learning a bunch of shortcuts that are not labeled on the front panel, there is a Max for Live device you can buy that adds an arrangement mode to the Push 2. Just Google PAM or Push Arrangement Mode. I haven't used it, I'm not interested in this functionality, so I can't comment on how it works. Another notable thing that you can't do with the Push 2 is playing around with the warp markers. Generally, the audio editing functionality of the Push 2 is limited. It does have decent sampling functionality using the simpler device, but when it comes to detailed audio clip editing, it is a bit limited. There are two problems with the Push 2. One of them is the hard to press buttons that I already mentioned. One of my biggest gripes with the Push. And again, this may be something personal. I haven't heard too many people complain, although there were some people on the Ableton forum that weren't too happy about this as well. But this is more of a feature, I guess. This is a deliberate decision to make the buttons this way. But the other problem that I don't like is this bug where you sometimes need to press the record button twice. So for example, we want to record on this audio track, the green one here. I hold it down to record, enable it. And so to record to this audio track, I press record and nothing happens. I have again found a topic on the Ableton forum that confirms that this is a bug and not a feature. When we press again, it starts recording, but this shouldn't be like that. So let's summarize the pros and the cons of the Push 2. The pros are its excellent integration with Ableton Live, and it gets updated as Ableton Live gets updated. It has great workflow for sampling and sequencing, and you can do this without using the mouse and the keyboard. And you can even program the built-in synths in Ableton Live, although that would be faster to do with the mouse and the keyboard. Amazing build quality and premium feel. It is built to last and feels incredibly sturdy. It has a big, colorful and easy to read screen with graphic displays of some of the features. The pads have great feel and sensitivity. It has 64 pads and different pad layouts which allow for some great sequencing features for both melodic and drum parts, and it's also great for playing melodies and not just for drums, because you have access to more notes. But then there are the cons of the Push 2. The buttons are hard to press. It is kind of relatively big and heavy, which makes it not so portable. For example, the Machine Mark III is better for portability in my opinion. The display and backlight of the buttons and pads are very dim if only using USB power. Let me unplug it for you to see. You can barely see what's going on unless you're in a very dark room. Which again makes it less portable because you need to find a power outlet to have bright screen and pads. No control over third-party plugins. You have good control only over the built-in devices in Ableton Live. So my thoughts and impressions and personal recommendation. If you're looking for a hardware controller for Ableton Live to enhance your beatmaking workflow and get you working more with your hands and not looking at the screen so much, there is nothing better than the Push 2. It's really excellent for this. It almost feels like a standalone device, but with the added bonus that you're actually inside Ableton Live. And this makes it very easy to transition from laying down ideas to arranging. But then a lot of people find out that it's actually faster and easier for them to use the mouse and the keyboard, especially if you're used to working like that. And honestly, for me, as much as I like working with the Push 2, I probably only use it for sequencing drums because it's really nice for that. But then as I get more into the project, I use the mouse and the keyboard a lot more, which makes it kind of redundant. But then again, if I don't have it, I will probably miss it, because using only the mouse and keyboard for sequencing and making beats gets kind of boring. So honestly, you can't be sure if it is for you unless you try it, but bear in mind that it's for people who actually like to work hands-on, who like to play stuff in, not so much for programming. Even though you got the step sequencer, I still feel that it is better suited for using it as an instrument, playing it with your hands in real time. And if you're not too much into that, I'm not sure if it's the right device for you. And I see a lot of people in Ableton groups and forums that actually decide that it's not for them, and they sell it because they realize that they're much faster with the mouse and the keyboard. Still, no other controller has this level of integration. There is no way that you can get that from a regular MIDI controller using your own mappings. Absolutely impossible. So if you want to feel like you're using a standalone drum machine but still being in Ableton Live, Ableton Push 2 is the one for you. And should you buy it or wait for the Push 3? Honestly, at this point, no one knows. I remember in 2018 or 2019, not sure, there were some ads on the Ableton website. They were looking for engineers and people to work on the next iteration of Push, but then the pandemic happened. I'm not sure how this has affected their plans, what stage this project is in. There is something planned, but who knows when it's gonna come. If your primary goal is not to be a gadget collector and not getting the best deal from your gadgets, and if you want to make music and you really need a hardware controller for Ableton, just buy it. Just buy it. I always tell people to just buy stuff and get on working, because the time you spend waiting for the Push 3 can be spent making music with the Push 2, getting better at it. Sure, you'll probably lose some money if you decide to sell it later on and get the supposed Push 3. Again, no one knows when the Push 3 is coming or whether it's coming out at all. It may be more expensive, so it doesn't necessarily mean that the Push 2 is gonna become cheaper when this one is released, so you never know. I always advise people, use what's available now and spend your time making music unless you are a gear collector. So this is all for this video. You can check out this Push 2 workflow demonstration in this video here, or you can check out more Push 2 tutorials and beatmaking sessions that I will link down in the description of this video. See you in the next one!